Let us take a trip back to the sweltering summer of 2003. The Chicago basketball franchise had finally found its undisputed savior, a chosen one meant to inherit the sacred throne left completely empty by their legendary former number 23. His name was Jay Williams. The fans absolutely worshipped him, the local media adored him, and the executive office had literally bet their entire corporate future on his remarkably broad shoulders. But everything they built shattered into a million pieces on a quiet, seemingly ordinary street corner at the intersection of Fletcher and Honore. According to the official Chicago police reports filed on the 19th of June, 2003, Jay Williams was operating a high-powered Yamaha street motorcycle without a valid state license. Why would a multi-million-dollar professional athlete risk his entire empire on a completely illegal nighttime ride? And here is where the story takes a much darker, almost incomprehensible turn. Based on the scene inspection protocols filed by the responding emergency services, it was explicitly noted that he was not wearing any protective helmet when his heavy bike suddenly lost control and violently collided with a streetlight. How could a professional whose physical body was his most valuable financial asset act with such staggering, baffling recklessness? Witnesses at the scene reported a landscape of absolute chaos, a terrifyingly heavy silence, followed by the panicked, screaming arrival of medical sirens. As local bystanders slowly realized the broken figure bleeding on the asphalt was none other than the city's golden boy. The initial shock sent massive tremors through the entire league, leaving executives scrambling in their high-rise offices and fans staring at their television screens in pure disbelief. But to truly understand the sheer magnitude of this devastating loss, we have to rewind the clock back a few short years and look at a jaw-dropping statistical record that still makes professional athletic scouts shake their heads in pure disbelief today. Long before the medical sirens echoed through the dark Chicago night, Jay Williams was busy architecting a bulletproof legacy at Duke University that most collegiate players can only dream of achieving in a lifetime. Under the notoriously strict and demanding guidance of legendary head coach Mike Krzyzewski, this fiery young point guard did not just play the game of basketball, he systematically and completely dismantled his opponents on the hardwood. He possessed a ruthless tactical mind that functioned exactly like a supercomputer under immense pressure. According to the official Collegiate League statistics published in April of 2001, Jay Williams secured the coveted national championship title while averaging an astonishing 21 points per game over the course of that grueling season. But how does a college kid handle that blinding level of national spotlight without completely crumbling under the immense psychological weight? He somehow thrived on it, feeding off the energy of hostile crowds. In fact, his dominance on the court was so absolute that, based on the historical archives of the National Basketball Writers Association, he was awarded the highly prestigious Naismith College Player of the Year trophy in 2002. This was the ultimate, undeniable validation of his supreme talent. He had meticulously crafted a flawless media image, the perfect student-athlete with excellent academic grades, a pristine public reputation, and an undeniable natural charisma that corporate sponsors were absolutely desperate to monetize. Sports journalists painted him as the flawless role model for a completely new generation, a golden ticket for any professional franchise lucky enough to draft him. However, behind tightly closed doors, even this seemingly perfect poster boy was facing a bizarre, highly unusual marketing dilemma. It was a corporate problem so entirely unexpected and uniquely pressing that it forced his management team to orchestrate an unprecedented public relations maneuver right before he stepped into the ruthless, money-driven world of professional sports. Stepping into the professional sports arena means instantly becoming a global corporate brand. But Jay Williams had a bizarre, highly complicated problem from the very start of his journey. His given birth name was actually Jason Williams. The massive issue? The professional league was already completely saturated with that exact moniker. Behind the scenes, marketing executives and sports agents were sweating bullets over the inevitable public confusion with the wildly popular, incredibly flashy point guard, known globally as White Chocolate, and yet another veteran player who was deeply entangled in a massive, career-ending legal scandal. The financial stakes were simply way too high to risk any sort of consumer mix-up. According to the club financial ledgers and contract records of that specific era, those two other men held binding agreements worth tens of millions of dollars, creating a convoluted nightmare for any major sponsor trying to sell signature shoes or expensive jerseys. Who exactly was the fan buying into? To fiercely protect his market value and future earnings, high-powered agents and corporate backers heavily pressured the young prodigy into a drastic, sudden identity shift. Based on the official league press releases distributed in the spring of 2002, a formal corporate request was filed to alter all association materials legally and professionally, shrinking his identity to simply Jay. It was a coldly calculated financial sacrifice, giving up a piece of his own personal history just to appease the merciless gods of television broadcasting contracts and corporate athletic branding. Did this forced corporate rebranding take a hidden psychological toll on a young man who was just trying to find his footing in a brutal industry? The strategic name change worked like absolute magic, creating a distinct and highly lucrative aura around him almost overnight. This fresh, commercially approved identity set the stage perfectly, and on the fateful night of the rookie selection, the staggering numbers on his very first adult contract promised to crown him the undisputed, incredibly wealthy king of Chicago. The atmosphere in the massive auditorium was absolutely electric as the most powerful executives in basketball gathered to gamble their entire franchises on unproven youth. The whole sports world was completely fixated on a monumental clash of talents, with Jay Williams standing as the ultimate American collegiate prospect against the towering international phenomenon, Yao Ming. The Chicago management was acting out of pure desperation, frantically searching for a fresh face to rescue their struggling organization after the devastating departure of their iconic number 23. They needed a messiah in sneakers, and they were more than willing to pay an astronomical premium to secure him. According to the official association protocols recorded on the 26th of June, 2002, the Chicago franchise proudly selected him with the second overall pick in the draft. But was this massive corporate investment based on rigorous scouting, or blind panic from a front office rapidly losing its grip on the fan base? The euphoria inside the team headquarters was palpable, with general managers publicly declaring they had just secured the absolute best point guard of the entire decade to lead their rebuild. Based on the financial reports filed by the club shortly after the draft ceremony, his guaranteed rookie contract was valued at approximately $17 million spread over 4 years. Why would a famously frugal organization hand over that kind of guaranteed wealth to a kid who had not played a single professional minute? The sheer size of that financial commitment placed an unimaginable heavy target firmly on his back before he even stepped onto the practice court. However, buried deep within those shining, multi-page legal documents lay one highly specific, seemingly obscure paragraph that would soon become the focal point of a massive corporate legal battle. When a professional athletic organization hands a young man millions of dollars, they are not just paying for his jump shot, they are literally purchasing total control over his physical body. The standard legal agreement in the highest basketball league is an incredibly strict, legally binding document designed specifically to protect the corporate investment from any outside harm or unpredictable variables. Based on public legal breakdowns of league agreements from that era, Paragraph 12 of the standard player contract explicitly prohibits athletes from engaging in any extreme off-court activities, specifically listing skydiving, mountain skiing, and the operation of any motorcycles. But how strictly are these rigid corporate mandates actually enforced when a newly minted millionaire decides he wants a quick thrill outside the gymnasium? The dirty reality of the early 2000s was that many young stars, flush with their very first massive paychecks, routinely treated these strict legal boundaries as mere suggestions. According to the internal records from the Players' Union, the official legal documents binding Jay to these specific corporate rules went into full legal effect in October of 2002. Yet the glaring question remains: did the front office purposefully turn a blind eye to the reckless habits of their most expensive asset? Or were they genuinely completely unaware of what he was doing after practice hours? While the highly paid corporate lawyers locked those signed, multi-page agreements inside secure office safes, the ink was barely dry before the immense pressure began to crack the psychological foundation of the player. And while management worried about his physical safety on the street, a much more immediate and deeply toxic conflict had already ignited inside the heavily guarded walls of the team practice facility, an explosive situation the local press was desperately trying to keep quiet. Stepping into a professional locker room as a highly touted rookie is like walking directly into a cage full of starving lions, and the welcome Jay Williams received was absolutely freezing cold. The established veterans on the Chicago roster were not exactly thrilled to hand the keys of their offense over to a deeply hyped college kid who was heavily promoted as their undisputed new leader. A bitter, hidden power struggle immediately erupted behind the tightly closed doors of the arena, primarily pitting the young point guard against established, ball-dominant scorers like Jalen Rose and Jamal Crawford. Based on statistical aggregators from the season of 2002 to 2003, his playing time was heavily contested, averaging roughly 26 minutes per game in a deeply crowded and fiercely competitive rotation. But why was the supposed savior of the franchise fighting tooth and nail just to get the ball in his hands during crucial offensive possessions? The psychological pressure from his own teammates was immense, leading to a profound sense of isolation and clear signs of nervous hesitation on the polished hardwood. According to transcripts of post-game media sessions from that turbulent season, Jalen Rose made several pointed, highly critical remarks regarding the distribution of roles and the offensive system. Was this just standard tough-love veteran leadership, or a highly coordinated, intentional effort to freeze the heavily paid rookie out of the spotlight entirely? The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and the young star was rapidly losing his confidence under the glaring arena lights. However, the most destructive war he would fight that year was not against the hostile men sitting next to his locker, but against the powerful figure standing on the sidelines whose rigid instructions he was contractually obligated to obey. The real war was not unfolding in the locker room, but on the brightly lit sidelines of the arena, where two completely different basketball philosophies violently collided. On one side stood the head coach, Bill Cartwright, an incredibly conservative tactician who firmly believed in a slow, highly structured half-court offense. On the other side was Jay Williams, a dynamic, lightning-fast point guard whose entire collegiate legacy was built on absolute speed and relentless fast breaks. According to the sports columnist's reports from February of 2003, a highly controversial series of games occurred where the star rookie was completely benched and sidelined during the most crucial deciding fourth quarters. And this raises an absolutely massive, glaring question. Why would a supposedly rebuilding organization intentionally suffocate the very multi-million-dollar asset they just drafted to save their franchise? The visible tension eventually boiled over into highly public, intensely heated arguments during television timeouts, with cameras catching the heavy frustration written all over the young star's face. The sports press of that time extensively wrote about the deep disagreements and the increasingly toxic atmosphere surrounding the coaching staff. Was the old-school head coach actively trying to break the highly paid rookie's spirit, or was the kid simply refusing to adapt to the grueling professional system? The staggering statistical fallout from this toxic power struggle was absolutely undeniable. Based on the official league archives, his overall shooting efficiency, specifically his field goal percentage, completely plummeted below 40% by the middle of that turbulent season. It was a statistical disaster for a player previously known for his lethal collegiate accuracy. And just when the harsh local critics were aggressively preparing to brand him as the absolute biggest draft bust of the entire decade, a totally unexpected night in early November shifted the entire narrative and forced every single skeptic in the arena to eat their words. The absolute heaviest pressure can either completely crush a young man or turn him into an unbreakable diamond, and for one spectacular evening, Jay Williams shone brighter than anyone else in the entire country. The ultimate test arrived when he had to face off against one of the most terrifying, dominant teams in the Eastern Conference, led by the legendary, incredibly intimidating veteran point guard Jason Kidd. It was a classic high-stakes battle between the highly touted rookie and the established, ruthless master of the court. According to the historical reference files of the association, this absolutely monumental clash took place on the 9th of November, 2002. But how does a struggling rookie, who is constantly fighting his own coaching staff, suddenly unlock the legendary magic that made him a collegiate icon? In the journalists' reports from the following morning, it was heavily noted that his performance was nothing short of a complete offensive masterpiece. A stunning display of deep three-point shots, explosive drives to the basket, and a phenomenal, almost telepathic vision of the entire floor. Based on the official game protocols and confirmed box scores from that specific night, his final statistical line was an absolute masterpiece. 26 points, 14 assists, and 13 staggering rebounds, securing the very first triple-double of his professional career. Why did this incredible, flawless performance only happen once, and who exactly was he trying to prove wrong that night? The overwhelming wave of morning newspaper headlines aggressively declared that the ancient sacred magic had finally returned to Chicago, instantly reviving the desperate hopes of millions of devoted fans. This single, deafening triumph on the hardwood provided him with a massive, dangerous surge of personal glory. However, that intoxicating, completely blinding sense of absolute invincibility soon led him directly into a high-end luxury vehicle showroom, resulting in a dark, secret financial transaction that would ultimately seal his tragic fate. There is an incredibly dark, hidden side to sudden fame and immense corporate wealth that the screaming television cameras absolutely refuse to show the public. Behind the perfectly tailored suits and the carefully crafted media smiles, Jay Williams was a young man quietly drowning under an ocean of unimaginable, suffocating stress. He was desperately searching for a secret, dangerous escape hatch from the brutal, unyielding demands of his high-profile management, the vicious sports media, and the hostile locker room environment. As stated in his own highly publicized memoirs released years later, it was during the spring of 2003 that he quietly finalized the purchase of an incredibly powerful, heavy, high-performance sports motorcycle. But why would a man whose entire physical livelihood completely depends on his delicate knees and ankles willingly straddle a terrifyingly fast mechanical beast? For him, twisting that heavy throttle was the only remaining way to feel completely free and untouchable, entirely disconnected from the heavy, suffocating chains of his multi-million-dollar corporate obligations. However, based on the deeply detailed materials gathered by investigative journalists digging into his background, there were absolutely no formal records or official documents indicating that he had ever successfully completed any mandatory, certified motorcycle safety training courses. How can someone confidently pilot a heavy, violently fast street machine without learning the absolute basic rules of survival on the open concrete? His close inner circle of friends and highly paid financial agents reportedly begged him to immediately get rid of the dangerously fast toy, completely terrified of the massive physical and financial risks involved. He simply ignored every single desperate warning, fully believing that his elite, world-class athletic reflexes would always protect him from any sudden tragedy. And this absolute, staggering recklessness finally reached its horrific climax on a warm, seemingly ordinary Thursday evening on the 19th of June, when the very last seconds of his glorious, multi-million-dollar athletic dream silently ticked away. It was approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 19th of June, 2003. The Chicago sun was beating down on the quiet intersection of Fletcher and Honore Street, a location that was about to be etched into the dark history of professional sports forever. Jay Williams was not in a team meeting or at a scheduled practice. He was straddling a powerful Yamaha YZF-R 6 bike, a machine capable of reaching speeds that no human body was ever designed to withstand without protection. According to the official police reports filed by the Chicago Department on that exact date, the young star was navigating the urban grid with a level of confidence that bordered on absolute delusion. Witnesses at the scene later described the chilling sound of a high-revving engine followed by a sickening metallic thud that echoed through the neighborhood like a gunshot. The bike had suddenly lost traction, sliding violently across the pavement before slamming directly into a heavy steel utility pole. Based on the formal scene reconstruction protocols, there were no skid marks indicating a controlled braking maneuver, suggesting the loss of control was instantaneous and total. Why would the most promising athlete in the city be operating such a dangerous vehicle without a license or even a basic safety helmet? As bystanders rushed to the smoking wreckage, they found a young man whose multi-million-dollar future had quite literally hit a brick wall. The initial police report noted a heavy silence at the crash site before the first sirens began to wail, signaling the beginning of a nightmare that would captivate the entire nation. Was this just a freak mechanical failure, or the inevitable result of a young man believing his own hype of being completely untouchable? The first responders on the scene knew immediately that they were not just looking at a traffic accident, but at the physical devastation of a local icon. By the final days of June 2003, the medical bulletins released to the desperate media were finally painting a horrifying picture of absolute physical devastation. Inside the sterile, heavily guarded hallways of the Northwestern Memorial Hospital, a team of world-class trauma surgeons was fighting a frantic around-the-clock battle just to save the young athlete's leg from a permanent loss of function. According to the official medical summaries published with the family's consent during that dark week, Jay Williams had suffered a complete and catastrophic tear of the peroneal nerve, an injury that effectively disconnected the brain signals from the lower limb. But the list of casualties within his own body did not end there. The clinical reports also detailed a severely fractured pelvis and 3 major torn ligaments in his left knee, including the crucial ACL. How can a world-class athlete, whose entire existence is defined by explosive movement and vertical leap, recover from a trauma that typically ends the careers of ordinary people? There was a heavy cloud of secrecy surrounding the hospital wing as the Chicago front office desperately tried to manage the flow of information while their star lay in a state of physical wreckage. In the investigative reports published by major sports outlets later that month, it was noted that the surgeons were forced to use advanced, highly experimental techniques just to stabilize the shattered bone structure. Was the public being told the full truth about his chances of walking again? Or were the team's publicists trying to maintain a shred of hope to protect their brand? Every single update from the operating room felt like a final sentence being read to a man who, only days prior, was considered the future of the game. The sheer scale of the damage was so profound that even the most optimistic medical experts in the country began to use the phrase "career ending" in their private consultations. While Jay Williams lay in a hospital bed fighting for his mobility, the atmosphere inside the executive offices of the Chicago franchise was one of pure, unadulterated panic. General Manager John Paxson was suddenly facing a professional and financial nightmare that no amount of management training could have prepared him for. During the frantic summer months of 2003, the team's legal counsel was working overtime to analyze every single syllable of the standard player contract Jay had signed just 1 year earlier. They discovered a massive, glaring legal opening. By operating a motorcycle, Jay had committed a clear and undeniable violation of the Hazardous Activities Clause. According to the internal financial ledgers of the organization, the club was potentially looking at a massive savings of over $10 million if they chose to simply void the contract and walk away from their injured star. But how does a world-famous franchise abandon its savior during his darkest hour without looking like a heartless, money-driven corporation? The moral dilemma was suffocating. If they cut him, they would be seen as villains by the fans. If they paid him, they were essentially rewarding a reckless violation of the rules. In the investigative reports leaked to the Chicago Tribune at the time, it was revealed that the front office was deeply divided, with some executives pushing for a total contract termination to protect the team's salary cap. Was the organization's primary loyalty to the recovery of the human being, or to the cold, hard mathematics of the professional league's financial regulations? As the legal bills began to mount, the franchise found itself in a strategic deadlock, trapped between a massive financial loss and a public relations catastrophe that threatened to alienate their entire global fan base. The boardroom doors were locked tight, and the air was thick with the kind of tension that only millions of dollars can generate. The Chicago executives were staring at a public relations catastrophe. They possessed every legal right to simply rip up the contract and leave their formerly prized rookie with absolutely nothing. But how do you explain to a fiercely loyal working-class fan base that you are tossing out the young man you just hailed as the ultimate savior? According to the official press releases distributed by the team management in February of 2004, the organization formally announced the mutual termination of his rookie agreement. But the true intrigue lay entirely in the hidden, unpublicized financial details of that departure. Based on the deep investigations conducted by sports financial analysts covering the league at the time, the club agreed to a massive severance package of approximately $3 million. But why exactly did a notoriously ruthless corporate entity voluntarily hand over $3 million to a player who had blatantly violated his legal obligations? Was this a genuine act of organizational compassion or a highly calculated hush money payment designed to quietly sweep a massive, humiliating scouting failure under the rug? The union representatives watched this unprecedented buyout closely, knowing it would permanently alter how rookie contracts were negotiated and insured moving forward. The heavy legal paperwork was finally signed, and the massive check officially cleared the bank, effectively severing his ties to the franchise forever. The money provided financial security, but those millions could not buy him a functioning nerve or a new knee, leaving him isolated in a sprawling mansion with nothing but his own devastating thoughts. The brightest arena lights create the darkest, most suffocating shadows when they finally turn off. For Jay Williams, the real nightmare did not begin on the asphalt of Fletcher Street, but in the agonizing, deafening silence of his own home. He went from hearing the deafening roars of 20,000 adoring fans to the slow, mocking ticking of a living room clock. Based on the deeply personal and highly shocking confessions detailed in his published autobiography years later, the grueling period stretching from 2003 to 2005 consisted of endless, agonizing physical therapy sessions and multiple complex reconstructive surgeries. His physical body, once a marvel of elite athletic engineering, was now a fragile cage of lingering pain. But how does a mind wired for hyper-competitive, world-class dominance handle the humiliating reality of struggling just to stand up from a chair? The overwhelming psychological torment demanded an escape, leading to a tragic, highly secretive downward spiral. In a highly emotional television interview broadcast to millions of viewers years later, he openly admitted to developing a severe, dangerous dependency on highly potent prescription pain medications during his isolated recovery. But who was actually monitoring these heavy pharmaceutical prescriptions, and why did the massive sports industry completely turn a blind eye to a struggling former star? The pills were initially meant to dull the excruciating physical agony of his shattered leg, but they quickly became a dangerous mechanism to numb the profound grief of a completely lost identity. He was spiraling into a deep, terrifying abyss, completely alienated from his former teammates and dangerously flirting with the darkest possible thoughts a human being can entertain. And just when it seemed the darkness had permanently swallowed his legacy, an unexpected phone call presented an absolutely insane, highly improbable ticket back to the hardwood. The human mind is an incredibly stubborn, entirely irrational machine, often refusing to let go of a shattered dream even when the physical body is screaming in absolute protest. Deep in the shadows, far away from the flashing television cameras and the harsh sports critics, Jay Williams began a highly secretive, grueling campaign to completely reinvent his broken mechanics. He had to meticulously relearn how to run, how to jump, and how to trust a leg that was essentially held together by medical miracles and sheer willpower. His former connections in the tight-knit basketball community eventually secured him a highly exclusive, closed-door audition. According to the official league transaction wires published in September of 2006, the New Jersey franchise shocked the sports world by signing him to a completely non-guaranteed training camp contract. But why would a legitimate, championship-contending organization willingly roll the dice on a man with a surgically reconstructed limb? Was this a genuine, calculated basketball decision, or just a clever, low-risk public relations stunt orchestrated to generate cheap headlines during the quiet preseason? The brutal, unyielding reality of a professional training camp quickly exposed the devastating truth. His brilliant basketball mind remembered every single complex offensive scheme, but his damaged physical frame simply could not replicate the necessary, explosive speed required to survive against elite athletes. Based on the official club's statistical reports and roster moves, his miraculous, highly publicized comeback lasted barely a single month, as he was formally waived from the team in October of 2006 after participating in just a handful of meaningless preseason exhibition games. The golden, heavily guarded doors of the Premier League had slammed shut permanently and unequivocally. However, his absolute, stubborn refusal to accept defeat was about to drag him down into the lowest, grittiest, and most unforgiving levels of the basketball underworld. The glittering arenas and private, heavily guarded luxury jets of the Premier League were officially a thing of the past. Jay Williams, a man who once commanded guaranteed multi-million-dollar contracts, was now forced to navigate the absolute bottom of the professional basketball hierarchy just to prove he still belonged on a hardwood court. According to the deeply buried archival records of the Development League, in late 2006, he quietly signed a contract to join the Austin Toros. But why would a former undisputed collegiate legend willingly subject himself to the grueling, incredibly unglamorous life of cramped commercial flights and cheap roadside motels? It was a desperate, heartbreaking attempt to outrun the terrifying physical reality of his own shattered body. He traded the deafening roars of 20,000 screaming fans for the echoing, suffocating silence of nearly empty high school gymnasiums. The psychological whiplash of that drastic financial and social transition must have been absolutely staggering for a former national icon. In the official game protocols filed by the Austin franchise during that harsh winter, a brutal, undeniable statistical fact clearly emerged. His highly anticipated minor league comeback lasted for exactly 3 games. The surgically repaired leg, held together by medical miracles and sheer stubbornness, simply could not endure the violent, relentless physical demands of the professional grind, resulting in a completely new, devastating tissue tear. Was this final, agonizing physical breakdown the ultimate sign that the universe was violently closing the heavy door on his athletic career forever? The local medical staff confirmed the absolute worst, and the dream of ever playing professional basketball again officially evaporated into thin air. But while his physical playing days had reached an undeniably bitter conclusion, the complete collapse of his athletic identity secretly laid the massive, unexpected foundation for a multi-million-dollar television broadcasting empire. When the physical body completely fails, the human mind must find a brand new arena to conquer, or risk completely fading into absolute public obscurity. Jay Williams traded his expensive basketball sneakers for a perfectly tailored suit, stepping directly in front of the blinding studio cameras to dissect the very game that had simultaneously crowned him and completely destroyed him. Based on the corporate press releases officially distributed by the ESPN network in 2008, the former prodigy inked a highly lucrative broadcasting partnership, completely transforming himself from a physically broken athlete into a premier national sports analyst. But how does a man whose own professional career was defined by a massive, catastrophic personal failure suddenly possess the absolute authority to ruthlessly critique the next generation of highly paid young stars? He possessed something that no other neatly dressed television pundit could ever buy: the dark, agonizing first-hand experience of a spectacular public downfall. According to the established sports television broadcasting schedules from that specific era, he quickly became a permanent, heavily featured fixture on the leading analytical programs dedicated strictly to collegiate basketball. He weaponized his own devastating physical and emotional trauma to expertly dissect the immense psychological pressure completely suffocating young athletes on national television. His voice resonated with a deeply raw, unapologetic honesty that instantly captivated millions of viewers sitting in their living rooms. He was no longer just analyzing simple defensive rotations. He was actively warning young millionaires about the hidden, terrifying traps secretly waiting for them off the hardwood. Yet, despite his overwhelming, highly visible financial success wearing a studio microphone, it would intimately take him several more years before he finally gathered the courage to publicly expose the shocking, heavily guarded legal secrets hidden inside the locker rooms of his past. For over a decade, the true, deeply unsettling reality of what actually transpired behind the heavily guarded doors of professional basketball arenas remained a fiercely protected corporate secret. But Jay Williams finally decided it was time to completely shatter that comfortable, highly lucrative public illusion. According to the official publishing imprint data, the year 2016 marked the explosive, highly anticipated release of his deeply personal autobiography. But why would a man who had successfully rebuilt his entire public image risk completely alienating his former colleagues and powerful league executives by dragging their darkest locker room secrets into the blinding daylight? Based on the heavily cited reviews from leading sports journalism outlets covering the release, the book contained absolutely shocking, incredibly raw fragments detailing a deeply toxic athletic culture of excessive alcohol consumption and the rampant, unchecked use of highly potent, illicit substances inside the professional locker rooms of the early 2000s. He explicitly detailed how young, incredibly wealthy athletes routinely relied on these dangerous chemical escapes to numb the crushing physical pain and the suffocating mental pressure of the league. In the investigative reports published that exact month, critics heavily noted that his controversial manuscript completely divided the massive sports community right down the middle. Some loyal readers deeply sympathized with his agonizing battle against severe dependency, while angry former players quietly accused him of breaking the sacred, unspoken brotherhood just to sell a few thousand hardcover books. Was he simply trying to heal his own psychological wounds, or was he intentionally trying to tear down the very corporate establishment that had immediately abandoned him? These stunning, widely circulated written confessions forced the entire professional sports industry to aggressively reevaluate their internal safety protocols, paving the way for a massive, multi-million-dollar legal shift in how contracts were drafted. The absolute devastation of Jay Williams did not just ruin a single professional career, it completely shattered the legal foundation of the entire sports industry. According to the comprehensive legal reviews published by the Players' Union in the subsequent years, following the crash, the massive athletic association was forced to aggressively rewrite the standard rookie agreements from the ground up. But why would a massive corporate league suddenly panic over one isolated, incredibly tragic incident? The team owners quickly realized they were completely exposed to massive financial ruin if another highly paid teenager decided to buy a dangerously fast toy. Based on the deep financial analytics data compiled by league insiders during that exact period, there was a staggering, unprecedented increase in the corporate insurance premiums that teams were forced to pay just to protect their guaranteed multi-million-dollar investments against non-sports-related injuries. In the heavily guarded boardrooms, team presidents were no longer just evaluating a player's vertical leap. They were essentially forced to monitor what their expensive assets were doing at 2 o'clock in the morning. Was this a genuine, caring effort to protect the physical lives of young men, or just a cold, ruthlessly calculated corporate strategy to protect the bottom line? This massive legal shift, quietly known among high-powered sports agents as the unwritten Williams Rule, fundamentally altered the harsh reality of professional sports forever. Every single young rookie signing a massive television contract today owes a piece of their heavily monitored corporate existence to the horrific lessons learned on that warm Chicago evening. But even with all these new, ironclad insurance policies locked safely inside the executive vaults, no amount of corporate money can ever answer the one haunting, agonizing question that still deeply torments the loyal fans of that legendary franchise. The most agonizing pain in professional sports is not a torn ligament or a shattered bone. It is the haunting, inescapable ghost of unfulfilled potential. If we look deep into the historical sports archives comparing the staggering statistics of the 2002 draft class, an absolutely heartbreaking reality emerges. Many of the young men selected on that exact same glamorous night went on to build incredibly lucrative, globally recognized careers lasting well over 10 full years. So what exactly would the fiercely proud city of Chicago look like today if Jay Williams had simply chosen to drive a heavily armored luxury car on the 19th of June? Based on the highly emotional retrospective interviews given by veteran league scouts and his former collegiate coaches for recent sports documentary series, the public consensus was that his absolute ceiling as a professional player was completely limitless. They explicitly stated that his unique combination of blinding speed and ruthless basketball intelligence could have easily brought another championship banner to the rafters of the iconic arena. Was he truly meant to be the undisputed heir to the greatest dynasty in basketball history? Or is it just the tragic, romanticized nature of his sudden downfall that makes his lost potential seem so incredibly massive? The harsh, undeniable reality is that we will never witness the legendary game-winning shots he was supposed to take under the blinding arena lights. But the terrifying, highly publicized destruction of his athletic empire ultimately gave birth to a completely different kind of victory. Jay Williams successfully transformed a devastating personal catastrophe, one that would have permanently broken most ordinary men, into a thriving, highly respected national television voice. His harrowing journey, which initially began as a horrifying police report about a reckless nighttime collision, ultimately transformed into the absolute greatest survival lesson for any young prodigy preparing to sign their very first life-altering professional contract.